Welcome to the Leading Generations podcast from Antioch Bible Baptist Church in Gladstone, Missouri. Each week, the podcast focuses on helping our church family live out its mission of leading generations to make disciples of Jesus Christ everywhere. Thanks for listening.
Welcome to the Leading Generations podcast. I'm glad to be here today with you, with our co-host, Andrew. Andrew, it's good to be back together as we finish our discussion on serving, the spiritual discipline that we're looking at together. We have looked at it in regards to faith, just sort of thinking about the definition of serving, the fact that we're all called to serve, we've all been gifted to serve. And now, and then last week we talked about this idea of family. So getting down just sort of some practical thinking about people, thinking about the excuses that we use not to serve, and then really maybe getting down to some really practical of tithing our time to serve. Like I think that's a good way to think about it. And so today we'd like to take this third episode to talk about culture and when it comes to serving. So thinking about how does the fact that God's given us the DNA to serve, and we've been called to do that as a response to Him for the good of our church, the edification of our church, the glory of God, thinking of our passage, 1 Peter chapter 4, verses 10 through 11. And Andrew, why don't you read that just to sort of get us back in the mindset? But this is sort of the passage that guides our thinking here, and now bringing it down to the cultural level. How does serving set us apart from culture? What does culture have to say about serving? So remind us of our verse that we've been looking at.
So 1 Peter 4, 10 and 11 says, as each has received a gift, use it to serve one another. So just to pause, at the very beginning, as each has received a gift. So it's a promise, a guarantee that we have a gift to use, and we're to use it to serve others. So use it to serve one another as good stewards of God's varied grace. Verse 11, whoever speaks as one who speaks oracles of God, whoever serves as one who serves by the strength that God supplies, in order, so we do all of this, that in everything God may be glorified through Jesus Christ. To Him be glory and dominion forever and ever.
Amen. Yeah, I love it. So everybody's been given a gift, right? As you've received a gift, you're used to use that gift to serve one another. Then you have really this two categories. If you speak for God. If you serve for the good of others. And then we do all of that for the glory of God.
Yeah. So we're talking about from really kind of the cultural standpoint here. And I think service is an interesting thing to talk about from a cultural perspective, because last month we talked about evangelism and the gospel and sharing the gospel. That was very countercultural. When we talk about service, just this idea of service, there is a cultural concept of serving, right? People serve. Secular companies will have days of service where they go clean something up or they go help at, somewhere. So there's this idea of serving, even in our culture and in the secular world. But I think what we're going to be talking through and maybe some of the differences is the motivation behind that service. So what are kind of maybe some of the distinct motivations that make our service as followers of Christ different than the way that those in the culture serve?
When I was thinking about that, Andrew, I was thinking about Mark chapter 10. I know as a church family, we're in the Gospel of Mark and we're working through that. We're about to take the summer and be off of Mark and go to our Psalms, 10 Psalms for the summer. So we'll pick it back up in the fall, and we probably won't get to Mark chapter 10 till probably 2027. We'll get there. But I think about the key verse for Mark is Mark 10:45, which says, for even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for many. And again, great verse. Jesus is the servant. But in the context of that verse, Jesus is talking about what separates Christians serving, the disciples serving, versus what the world thinks about serving, because he says it this way. If you go back to verse 42, he says, you know that those who are considered rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. But it shall not be so among you. But whoever would be great among you must be your servant, and whoever would be first among you must be slave of all. And so I think this is the sort of the upside down kingdom of God, where many times in our culture, service is used as a status, as a way to sort of push yourself up in the eyes of others. Like I think about building your resume, right? And it's like, man, if I can put on my resume that I served in this way and I was a part of this company, again, not a bad thing, but I do think sometimes in the culture, it's used to build a resume to make me look good, right? Like I want to, I'm great because look, I gave to this organization. We built this house in Haiti. We did, it's like, look at how great we are, where Jesus is like, that's not the reason why we serve, right? Like we're set apart from culture in that we get the opportunity to reflect Christ to the world by serving him through serving others, right? And so we're not looking to use that service as a means to go up in the world in that way. We're using it as a means to reflect Christ to the world. So I think that Mark 10 is a good reminder of greatness in God's eyes is those who serve. It's not those who, serve to build their resume, but it's those who just serve the Lord.
Yeah. So really, I mean, and it is, you were right to point that out, that it's the upside down kind of economy of Christ, right? Yeah. So when we think about service for the follower of Christ versus service in the world, it's not self-enhancement, it's self-sacrifice. Yeah. Right. The first shall be last and the last shall be first kind of idea. And especially that Mark 10 passage, I think is so good because it's even more specifically in some ways talking about leadership. Yeah. Right. So as you're leading, it's almost like the more power you have, the more influence you have, the more you should be serving others. Yes. So the more status you have, the more you should be humbling yourself is the idea, right? Yeah. So that's the whole, like, don't lord it over them like the Gentiles do, right? Yes. So I think that in itself is countercultural, but that's what we're called to in service to Christ.
Yeah, I think about businessmen that you hear at the end of their life, they gave away 90% of their income and they were really involved in these organizations that you never knew about because they were serving the Lord, right? Like it wasn't to grow their status. Yeah. They were just quietly using the influence that God has given them for the good of the edification of the church, for the glory of God. But they didn't make much of themselves in doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think when we think of we talked in the last episode a little bit about busyness being a struggle for people. So we talked, really kind of zeroed in that conversation, I think, on kind of the working class, like parents, single married couples that are kind of in this stage and season of working, having jobs, that kind of stuff. But I think the temptation of the culture is to really push back against students and retirees, right? Those two kind of before you enter the workforce and after you're done with the workforce, those two groups of people are really kind of the ones that I think struggle because culture and society and the world tells them, hey, once you enter the workforce, you kind of have this idea of like, well, I'm working, I have a job, I have responsibility, I do things for others. But especially, man, when you're retired, it's like, I've put in my time. Right. I'm going to go live my life and do stuff for me. When you're a student or, even a college student, it's, hey, I'm about to be, chained down with a job. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to live my life. I'm not going to be nailed down to serve somewhere. I'm not going to do that right now. So let's maybe talk for a second about those two groups, and how we can help them think through those kind of cultural things.
Yeah. What I think is interesting about both of those groups is that, like, culture is even acknowledging that people in those age groups you're wired to serve, and you're more content, you're more happy if you are serving. So like young at hearts, those that are like 65 and older, Mayo Clinic Health System said that those that volunteer, serve, are associated with lower rates of depression and anxiety, especially for adults 65 and older. So here's, again, Mayo Clinic, not a Christian, organization, is saying as they have surveyed those that are 65 and older, there's a lower rate of depression and anxiety if they're serving others. Along those same lines, United Health Group said 96% of people who volunteered over the last 12 months said that volunteering enriched their sense of purpose. In a study by the United Health Group, 78% of people who volunteered over a 12-month period said they felt that their charitable activities lowered their stress. They were more calm and peaceful than people who didn't participate in volunteer work. Right? So I think of that whole retirement side of it, and it's like, man, if you go live for yourself, that's going to wear out, Like it's not going to go well for your soul, for your heart. Why? Because God's wired you. So we can even go to stats. I mean, yes, we know what Scripture has said, right? But it's like now, even in culture, they're backing it up with stats of like, hey, if you're 65 or older, you need to be serving. You don't need to necessarily go into a maintenance mode of your life. You need to continue to serve, because in doing that, less depression, less anxiety, there's more peace, more calm in your life. And it's like, well, hey, looky there. Like the Lord was right when he said, as each of you received a gift, use it to serve one another. And there's no like until you're 65, right? Like it's like all the days of your life that you're using it to serve one another. So that's why I think of our young at hearts, our older people. Be using your gifts to serve the Lord. And again, like we've talked about, it could look different than it did when you were 40 or 50, for sure, right? Like you're older, you're a little bit slower, as far as you don't move as quick as you used to, but still use the gifts that the Lord has given you. And then you mentioned students. And one of the things I love about our church family is that we really do encourage students to serve. Like we encourage students to go through the membership process that we have here and serve in our kids ministry or welcome or, first impressions teams, things like that. But last month I did an interview with Michaela Walker, our upper elementary ed director, looking at that anxious generation. And what's interesting is the data from that says, and the encouragement that author said at the end of his book is he's talking about how do we sort of break that habit from a phone-based childhood and teenage years to a play-based. One of the things that he said to do is to serve others. He said that the way 13 to 18-year-olds deal with anxiety is to find ways for them to nurture and lead. And the idea there is serving others. And so I love that we have students that serve in our kids' classes as a means to nurture and lead others. So he uses as an example of the book of like a Boy Scout situation where an older Boy Scout was helping a younger Boy Scout. And obviously he's not a Christian. So I think of seeing that within our church family where you have these middle school or high schoolers that are investing in our younger years. I think that's a way to help them be who God has called them to be. And not, like you said, not saying wait till you're 20s, 30s, 40s, like in that, then you can serve. Like, no, as a 13 to 18-year-old, it's important for you to be looking for opportunities to serve others. And I think this is important for mom and dads to model it, but to also challenge them in that, right? Challenge them to get involved in the church.
Yeah.
Challenge them to look for opportunities to serve others. And man, yeah, I love like our facilities manager, Dennis Miller. Like one of the things I love about Dennis is he serves our church, and yeah, he gets paid by our church, right?
Sure.
But he serves our church, and I watch him bring his son Zach and his other kids with him when he's got to do extra things. He'll bring them with him, and the kids are vacuuming and they're helping take out trash. Like he's teaching his kids to serve others through his example. So he's doing it right there along with them, but they're serving alongside of him. So I think that's really important for, yes, young at hearts, but also our students to be thinking about and stepping into opportunities to serve. So as parents, we need to push them that direction. And culture is telling us, stats are telling us from culture that those kinds of kids and those kind of young at hearts, they're more fulfilled, they're more at peace. And why? Well, we know it's because that's how God's wired them.
Yeah.
Right? He's wired them to serve as a response to him for the edification of the church and his glory. So
yeah. Yeah, and I think what you mentioned at the end of the last episode about tithing your time, I think is when I think about what you were just talking about and the culture, like that's such a countercultural idea, right? Of when we talk about retirees or students or families trying to lead their kids to do things right, we tend to prioritize our time doing things that are most important to us, right? So if we have kids, if we have families, maybe that's, hey, I'm really passionate about my kid being good at sports. I'm really passionate about my kid doing dance or ballet or gymnastics or education, whatever the case may be. And so it's like, man, we're going to prioritize that. Or maybe you're, what we might call like a workaholic, right? And so you're like, man, I'm giving all of my time, all of my extra time into my job, into my company, whatever the case may be. But again, that goes to why this is countercultural, because we're saying that something is important that the culture is not considering important, right? That the most important thing about you and about your family is that you're a follower of Christ.
yes,
And if you are a follower of Christ, you are expected to serve and you're gifted to serve.
Yes.
And so through your time with the Lord, because of the grace that you've received, we should be praying that God would cultivate in us a willingness to serve his church. I think that looks like this countercultural idea of tithing our time to make sure that we're doing what's most important, and that's serving the Lord.
Yeah. Yeah, because so often, those kind of things are like sports and dance and music, things like that. Those are self-serving, right? I'm doing that for my glory, my good, rather than the good of the edification of the church and the glory of God. That's a good point.
And we love sports.
Oh, sure.
So not bashing those things.
No.
But
I'm about, this is a Wednesday. My daughter's got a district soccer game tonight that I'm,
we love sports. We love those
sports,
things. We have commitments with our own kids, but
Right.
It's what I think we're talking about, just to clarify, is those things, the culture wants to tell us that those things are the most important things.
Yeah. That I think a good way is that you prioritize those over
Right.
service to the Lord. Where what we're saying, again, the upside down kingdom is, no, you prioritize the Lord, you prioritize the church. Then as those things fall into that, then you're a part of them. You do your best to the glory of God, but first comes the Lord and his church.
Yeah. I think of when I was thinking about really both of these kind of groups that we're talking about, there was a book that was really big when I was kind of coming to faith, kind of growing into faith by John Piper, who we mentioned previously. But his famous book, "Don't Waste Your Life," right, is
Great
big.
book.
It's this whole. This is what it's about. It's this whole topic.
And if you haven't ever read it, I'd encourage you.
Yeah, it's a
go
great
read
book.
it.
Yeah. But he has just, especially thinking of retirees, the young at hearts, that type of age group. He has this great story and analogy,
Yes.
right? You know the seashell
Yes.
thing, right? So, but he talks about this idea of man, you've lived your whole life, you finally retired, you have all of this money in retirement, you have all of this time, and you decide for the last 20 years of your life that you're going to go buy a house on the beach. You're going to spend your days on the beach. You're going to buy a boat. You're going to live on vacation 24/7, right? And you're going to spend all of your free time just walking the beach, enjoying life and collecting seashells. And then he says, hey, eventually you're going to die. And when you get there and you stand before the Lord and he's going to ask, what did you do for me in your life? You're going to show him your seashell collection, right? Like here's the seashells that I've been gathering for the last 20 years.
Yes.
Which mean nothing is the point, right? And so it's this idea of man, especially those two things. There's a uniqueness with students, with college students, high school students of flexibility, having more time on your hands, not being kind of weighed down with work responsibilities, family responsibilities, where you can go do amazing things for the Lord without these things kind of tying you down and complicating some of that. And then especially retirees, like you are at a stage of life where you have excess time, excess finances, excess wisdom and abilities. Why not use those to serve the Lord? It's the parable of the talents.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of.
Yeah. So, the Lord has given you, are you going to take the treasure and hide it in a field? Or are you going to return an investment to what the Lord has given you?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I know we got to land the plane here, but I thought about that when you were talking about that with John Piper and this idea of serving the Lord, like the Jesus parable in Matthew 25, where it's the idea of a servant, right? He says, who called his servants and he trusted them with his property, and he gives the 5, the 2, and the 1, and he leaves. Again, this is all a picture. We're the servants. The Lord is the master that's leaving, and then he's going to eventually come back. And how are we going to steward? And again, back to our key verse of 1 Peter 4:10, stewards of the varied grace of God. We've been gifted these spiritual gifts, our heart, our abilities, our personality, our experiences. We've been gifted all of these things so that we can use them for the edification of the church and the good of the church and the glory of God. And how are we going to do when the Lord returns and he comes back and he says, hey, what'd you do with what I've given you? Well, again, I don't want to stand before the Lord and say, well, here's a collection of stuff that I've collected over my last, 20 years of life or over 40 years of my life, as opposed to here's the people that I've served. Here's the people that have come to know you. So I would encourage our church family, like Paul would say this in Titus chapter 1. We're going through this in our men's study. Titus 1:1, he starts it with Paul, a servant of the God and an apostle of the Lord Jesus Christ. Paul saw himself first and foremost as a servant of God. And apostle was what he did. His service was who he was. And so I think, Andrew, just again, maybe to close our time together, we got to see ourselves as servants of God, first and foremost. Like it goes back to the obedience, the gratitude. Like if we see ourselves as servants of God, then this whole serving thing, there's going to be days that it's difficult. There's going to be days that we don't want to do it, but it's who God has made us to be. We are servants of his. Therefore, we get the opportunity to serve others. And seeing ourselves first and foremost as servants of God helps us to then live out this spiritual habit, the spiritual discipline of serving the Lord. So.
Yeah. Well, church family, thanks for being with us this month as we have talked about service. We hope that this has encouraged and challenged your heart towards service. And we would encourage you to continue to pray about it, that you, like Joshua, would be able to say, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. May that be true of your family and ours and of Antioch. So thanks for being with us. We'll see you next week.